Have you ever actually stopped to think about how literally everything around us is made? From the detergent sitting in your laundry room to the plastic container on your desk, we usually picture these massive, smoke-belching factories churning this stuff out. But what if the factories of the future are invisible? What if, instead of massive, polluting smokestacks, the heavy lifting of our global manufacturing was done by microscopic organisms? Welcome to this explainer on white biotechnology. We're going to dive right into this today because we're looking at the invisible heroes of what is essentially a massive, sustainable industrial revolution. We're talking about utilizing the very smallest forms of life on Earth to solve some of our absolute biggest industrial problems. Okay, so first things first, let's make sure we're clear on exactly what this term means. White biotechnology, which, by the way, you'll also hear called industrial biotechnology, is the application of biological systems, enzymes, and microorganisms right into our industrial processes. The overarching goal here is to produce goods and energy in a sustainable, eco-friendly way. Basically, we're taking the absolute genius of microbiology and using it to completely replace those harsh, traditional, chemical-based industrial methods. It's all about converting renewable raw materials into highly valuable, eco-friendly products. To put it in perspective, think about the traditional industry we're all used to. It's heavily dependent on fossil fuels, heavily reliant on toxic chemical processes, and obviously responsible for high levels of pollution. Now, compare that to white biotechnology. It completely flips the script. It utilizes renewable resources, creates biodegradable materials, and runs on significantly cleaner, safer processes. Actually, instead of fighting nature to make what we need, we're partnering with it. Nature's tiny biofactories are literally taking over the assembly line. So, here is a quick look at our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with nature's tiny factories. Then we'll look at greening energy, move right into bioplastics and fermentation, talk about cleaning up our mess, weigh the promises and challenges, and finally wrap up with the future of manufacturing. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Nature's Tiny Factories, Enzymes at Work. Meet your new microscopic assembly line workers. Enzymes act as biological catalysts, which just means they speed up chemical reactions in industrial processes. Whether it's detergent production, food processing, or even the paper and pulp industry, we rely on highly specialized workers to get the job done. For example, we've got amylase, which specializes in breaking down starches, protease, which targets and dismantles proteins, and lipase, which aggressively breaks down stubborn fats. Instead of using harsh synthetic chemicals to get the grease out of your clothes, these natural enzymes go in and systematically do the heavy lifting at a totally microscopic level. Moving right along to Section 2, let's talk about greening energy and specifically biofuels. These microorganisms aren't just cleaning our clothes, they're actively building an entire alternative energy sector. They're fundamentally changing how we create energy and are successfully reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Take this really elegant three-step process for making biofuel. Step 1, you start with a renewable raw material, something like sugarcane. Step 2, you introduce microorganisms for fermentation. They literally feed on the sugars. And step 3, boom, they produce ethanol, a fully viable biofuel. Just like that, we have a real, renewable alternative to fossil fuels. And we're seeing very similar processes for biodiesel and biogas as well, which is completely rethinking how we power our world. Let's shift gears now to Section 3, Bioplastics and Fermentation, Making Materials. Now, fermentation isn't just for making ethanol. Microorganisms are working behind the scenes across a massive range of products that we use every single day. They're brewing the organic acids in our food, like citric and acetic acid. They're manufacturing the antibiotics that keep us healthy, producing the amino acids and vitamins you might take with your breakfast, and even creating heavy-duty industrial solvents. And the best part? Everything here is produced far cleaner and much safer than traditional chemical synthesis allows. And then there's the absolute magic of bioplastics. Traditional plastics, as we know, are fossil fuel-based, and they're going to sit in landfills for centuries. But bioplastics, they're made from renewable biological sources. They're being used right now for packaging materials, medical devices, and agricultural films. But here is the real game changer. They are biodegradable. This isn't just about making things differently. It's a direct, actionable weapon against the global plastic pollution crisis. Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, Cleaning Up Our Mess, Waste Management. You see, it's not just about what these microbes can make, it's about what they can get rid of. Enter the fascinating concept of bioremediation. We are literally deploying bacteria to treat industrial wastewater, degrade massive oil spills in our oceans, and detoxify dangerous chemical effluents. We essentially find or engineer bacteria that eat petroleum pollutants and chemical waste, and we set them loose on our industrial messes like a microscopic cleanup crew. They clean up the environment naturally, reversing damage that honestly previously seemed permanent. Okay, but we do need a reality check. Let's look at Section 5, Promises and Challenges. We're facing a really fascinating juxtaposition today. The promises are incredible, right? Lower energy consumption, massively reduced chemical waste, and long-term cost-effectiveness by utilizing renewable resources. It's a huge win for the environment and the economy. But we can't just ignore the challenges. Shifting an entire factory over to white biotechnology requires some seriously high initial setup costs. And perhaps the biggest hurdle is scale-up difficulties. I mean, it's one thing to brew a small batch of bioplastic in a perfectly controlled lab. It's another entirely to produce enough of it to efficiently replace every single plastic bottle in the world. And building on that, we really have to remember we're working with living things. There's a very high level of technological complexity involved. You need highly specialized equipment to keep these biological systems running smoothly. Furthermore, there's a limited stability with some enzymes. They might work flawlessly in ideal, pristine laboratory conditions, but putting them under the massive strain of heavy industrial loads, that can sometimes break them down. Working with biology is a delicate balancing act for sure. So, how exactly do we overcome these hurdles? Let's turn to our final section, the future of manufacturing. Where are we going? To tackle those very challenges, we're looking at some absolutely thrilling advancements on the horizon. We aren't just relying on the enzymes we randomly find in nature anymore. We're moving into advanced enzyme engineering and synthetic biology, literally designing custom organisms built specifically for the rigors of heavy industry. We're developing improved biofuel technologies and pushing hard for totally carbon-neutral industrial processes. But the most fascinating point here has to be the integration with artificial intelligence. AI is being used right now to optimize these complex biological processes, predicting exactly how enzymes will react and figuring out how to scale them up efficiently. It's wild stuff. And that brings us to this really powerful quote derived directly from the source material. It plays a major role in building a circular and bio-based economy. That right there is what you should take away from this explainer today. White biotechnology isn't just some neat science experiment. By reducing pollution, lowering greenhouse gases, and promoting renewable resources, it is the fundamental bridge to a greener economy, where our waste literally becomes the food for the next generation of materials. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen how these tiny, invisible factories have the immense power to replace toxic chemical processes. They can mitigate climate change, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and literally eat our pollution. So if microbes can clean our water, fuel our cars, and replace our plastics, are we actually ready to let nature run our industries? Thank you for exploring this fascinating topic with me today, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning how the world around you is truly made.